The Retirement Cafe Podcast, episode 63, helping over 50s find age-friendly employers.
Retired or thinking about retirement? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe Podcast. In each episode, we bring you an important conversation with insight, tips and knowledge, all designed to help you live a fulfilling and successful life in retirement. Here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner and Accredited Later Life Advisor, Justin King.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe Podcast, which is sponsored by the Timeline app. Timeline is retirement income planning software that helps financial planners like me bring your retirement journey to life and answer your big retirement income questions. This episode is the first part of our series on working into retirement. As you know, we regularly discuss on the podcast the importance of finding purpose and meaning in retirement. One of the ways of doing that is through some kind of work, whether that's continuing to work or taking up something new. But how easy is it to find a job in later life? And are we, as a society, really open to employing older people? Will that need to change with our ever-increasing life expectancies? My guest on the podcast this week is Stuart Lewis. He founded Restless in December 2018 to address just this challenge. Thank you for joining me and welcome to the podcast, Stuart.
Thank you for having me. A real pleasure to be here.
It's good to meet you. So Stuart, tell me a little bit about who you are and then maybe you can move into, how the idea of Restless came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Stuart Lewis. I'm the founder of Restless. I have a background in big corporate actually, and not in the sphere of recruitment or what have you. And throughout my career, ever increasingly moved into more entrepreneurial roles with a view of doing something myself and having a real positive impact on the world. And I think that's what culminated in the launch of Restless 10 to 12 months ago. And if I think about where the idea came from, it came from a couple of areas actually. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Channel 4's The Old People's Home for 4-year-olds.
Right.
So it's Feel Good Channel 4 at its best. And I found it a really heartwarming show. And they took 11 pensioners in their mid-80s who were in a care home, and they exposed them to the highly toxic substance that is 4-year-old children every day for a 6-week period. And they did it as a pseudo-scientific experiment. So they measured them for depression, for physical mobility and mental cognition before and after the 6-week period. And the results were quite profound and kind of really eye-opening for me. At the start of the show, 9 of the 11 individuals were registered as depressed. At the end, none were. So they'd completely changed their outlook on life from this exposure to kind of toxic 4-year-old children. I think what was perhaps more interesting as well is that both physical mobility and mental cognition had improved. And if I think of some of the reasons for that, the barrier to moving, if you've got a 4-year-old running at you, you don't think about it. You're just naturally more active. You react to this 4-year-old child running towards you. So it's kind of a really eye-opening show for me. And the first series ran at just about the time that my father passed away. So my father passed away on Christmas Eve 2016. And I think when you lose a parent, you do two things. So one is you reflect on your own life. And I realized that I wasn't getting any younger and I'd always wanted to have this social impact and have more of a positive impact. I think the second is you reflect on your parents' life. And he was one of the very lucky ones in that he was retired for 35 years when he passed away.
Wow.
And I think that's quite a long time. And I think these two things cumulatively kind of helped me came up with this idea of not getting people in their mid-80s back into the employment market, but around helping people stay active for longer and kind of enjoy that sense of purpose. And I think the central thesis was that no one wanted to go for a cliff edge of 5 days a week for 4 decades into nothing. And I think actually it's pretty well documented that could be quite disruptive for people and not often people are very excited about it, but it's not all it's cracked up to be. So it was built around the central thesis of helping people bridge that 5 days a week to nothing by kind of creating a glide into retirement. And I think as we've actually got into it and we've launched, we've expanded downwards quite significantly. So our average candidate age is only 55. And I think we're picking up this real theme around this being a huge transition point for people, perhaps one of the biggest life transition points since leaving education to go into the workplace. I think if you think kids will have left home, gone to uni or gone into the workplace, mortgage might be smaller than it once was. And I think people are really putting their heads up and going, I've got 20 good years ahead of me in the workplace. Actually, what do I want to do with those 20 years? How do I maximize the opportunity it presents? And actually, so our average candidate age is 55. And there's a real mix of people looking to change careers, looking for full-time work, or for people looking for part-time on that kind of original glide for retirement.
Mm. So coming back to your father's story, did he just kind of get to that cliff edge and stop work for 35 years, or what was his retirement like?
So he took early retirement due to a mild disability, actually. So he did go through the cliff edge of retirement. And I remember having conversations with him about, he found the loss of status quite a challenge, actually, at first, as many people going into retirement will also say. You go from having kind of a purpose, a role, a place, and a really big place in an organisation, to actually kind of you're just on your own again. And I think that transition was hard. I think by the end, but that bridging point, people get through it in their own ways. I think for us, he had young children at home, which was great, and we got to spend a lot of time together. But I think, so depending on the setup and around the working environment, I think is crucial to ensuring that you can make the most of that retirement period or not.
Yeah. And of course, I suppose there's a lot of it comes down to that, there's the financial capability of obviously whether you need to continue work or whether you found yourself doing work that is possibly well paid but unfulfilling. And is this now an opportunity to go and do work that gives you much more pleasure? And therefore, you might say it's not work.
Exactly right. And I think we see a huge divergence within the audience, actually. I think one of the things to point out, which is very interesting for financial planning perspectives as well, is that there's quite a big life expectancy gap between the most affluent parts of the country and the least affluent parts. I think the gap the ONS predicts is about 10 years at the moment. But that flows through into healthy life expectancy gap of nearly 20 years. So that massively affects people's attitudes towards working into later life. And for those who have a very healthy, benefit from having great health and have a financial support, it presents an enormous opportunity actually to do what they want to do and to retrain and to kind of live a fantastic kind of semi-retirement. And I think for others, actually, the story is less rosy, and that they feel the need to work because they have to work to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, so what does Restless actually do? If I was a 50-year-old something who was thinking about, well, I don't know, I'd fancy a different career or a different job, or how do you help?
Yeah, so we work in three different ways, actually. If I focus on the way we help individuals is probably the best way. So we have a job board that hosts jobs from employers that we know are interested in having an age diverse workforce.
Right.
So there's a bias towards more flexible type of working patterns, but we will work with employers who really value this audience.
And who are they? Just give me some typical examples of employers that you work with.
Yeah, so Co-op is perhaps a great example. So they're known for their ethical values.
Right.
When they publish their age diversity stats in their annual report, showing that they live and breathe what they talk about here. I think 30% of their workforce is over the age of 50. So again, a great. The proof of the pudding is always in the numbers, as they say. But it just ties really well with their community thinking, how they engage with the local communities around their store for them. So in addition to the job hosting, we offer a number of pieces of career advice. So everything we do is through the digital platform, which is great for those who can kind of self-learn and self-discover. I think we'd love to provide one-to-one support, but we're just too small to be able to do that at this point. But we have very tailored advice on the site for things from how to approach you're overqualified question that comes up many, many times for people, through to how to explain career gaps on your CV, how to bridge a 40-year career into 2 pages of A4, which is what most CVs need to be. So we've got all of the advice content is very tailored for this audience and some of the challenges that they face. I think the other and perhaps the most popular part of the site is the ideas and inspiration side, where we'll work with existing members of Restless and kind of to help document their stories for people. Because what we've learned is that people like understanding and seeing similar people to them and the journeys they've been on, because it opens their ideas to possibilities.
Yeah,
a number of the articles we'll write about kind of role opportunities where life experience is an advantage, for example. It will help showcase a long list of ideas that people perhaps had not considered. And it's back to this point around this being a huge transition in people's lives. They're kind of often they're looking for inspiration for a change. I think moving away from the candidate side, in the background, which is something that people don't see much of what we're doing actually, is we're working with employers to constantly educate them on A, the benefits that this audience can bring to them, B, some of the demographic shifts that are happening. Because I think they're any employer that is thinking that today's tight labour market is purely cyclical, I think is in for a bit of a shock come 5-10 years down the line. And I think, and kind of also helping educate them on flexibility practices and how they can attract and engage with this part of the workforce. And I think the final thing we do is we've got quite an extensive press outreach, which is just trying to raise awareness of outdated stereotypes of age in the workplace, and almost to get people to challenge their own perceptions of it and think about age in a much more positive and aspirational light. I think for those that have good health, this presents a wonderful opportunity in stage of life for them to do what they want to do.
Absolutely. And I can imagine, well, I know, I talk to only retirees and really, and a lot of people possibly think that they've had a certain skill set all their life. That's what they've learned to do. They've worked in whatever business or service industry or whatever it may be, in fact, and want to do something else, but possibly don't feel that they've got the skills to do so. So how would you help people in that kind of mindset?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is for people to open their eyes to the transferable skills they have. And actually, if they've been, whatever they've been, so if someone's been a teacher, for example, for the last 30 years, and they want to come out of the education system, we see that quite a bit. We also see people who want to retrain and become teachers, for example.
Right.
But you've demonstrated leadership, you've demonstrated exceptional communication, you've demonstrated all manner of organisation skills, all of these that are highly attractive to employers across a range of different fields. It's almost just opening people's eyes to thinking about their own skill sets in a very different way to how they'd perhaps thought about them. And then I think that when they go make that kind of positive mindset change, it opens up a world of opportunity for them.
I'm very interested in what you said a minute ago about how do you take 40-year CV, you're overqualified, you've been the, I don't know, some of our clients are ex-PLC directors, and I don't know. I mean, maybe they want to work at the co-op because they want to have a little community job, etc. I mean, tell me about how you do deal with that.
Yeah, it's a really core question for this group, right? I think there's almost at some point in our lives, by definition, everyone will have a peak career role, and when that is different for every single person. So if you're a CEO of a multinational company, it might be in your 60s. On average, with pay data we see, it's actually in their 40s that people's at least peak salary role peaks.
Right.
I think what is challenging for people is when they're beyond peak role, how do they convince employers that they're not overqualified for a job? And we for us, it's one of the most blatant forms of age discrimination there is there. I think in employers' defence, often they will use this as a term because they're worried about someone's commitment. So they're like, if you've done all these brilliant and wonderful things, how do I know you're going to be interested in this role that you're applying for? How do I know that you're going to be committed to it? And how do I know that you're going to stick around in it? And I mean, it's a classic example of where assumptions are the enemy of reason. So actually, instead of making assumptions about someone's intent for this, how do we assume? We should assume because they've applied for the role that they really want that role. And I think from an individual's perspective, it's that what can really help them is if they address this head on and say, this is why I'm really interested in this role working for you and working for this company, because then you're taking away any concerns about commitments and so on, kind of in addressing them right up front.
Yeah, fantastic. So, from an employer's perspective, are they? Do they think, oh well, they're a bit over the hill, and they can't learn new skills, and they won't be very dynamic, and there's not much energy. Just thinking of this kind of stereotypical perception, possibly of older workforce. Does that come through, or what's your experience of that?
Yeah, so the we get a positive lens from the employers who approach us, because they're obviously they're keen on the idea and they want to actively approach this audience. I think of the ones that work with us, I think there's 4 main buckets of people. So there's those that actively value this demographic already, and there's quite a large number of employers who would actually go and seek out this level of experience or seek out this level of talent. So there is a real age positive group of employers. I think there's an increasing numbers, and we're trying to drive awareness of this, around who are interested in this diversity of thought. So diversity and inclusion has been big for big corporates for a while, actually. And it comes down to diversity of thought and different opinions and so on. And I think one of the pieces that we will actively talk about is the benefits of an age diverse workforce and multi-generational teams. I think the diversity of thought you'll get between a 25-year-old and a 59-year-old will be fundamentally very, very diverse, which leads to a kind of a magical mix of ideas and contributions to the business. I think increasingly we're seeing a number of employers who are struggling to recruit via existing methods. So their tried and tested routes of the last decade are no longer working. So they're interested in kind of actually, how do we lean into this audience as a really talented group of individuals to find incremental talent that we hadn't looked at before. And then I guess there's an element around flexibility. So one of the last pieces of research we did was that 40% of all part-time workers are over the age of 50. So if you're looking for part-time roles, actually you'd be mad not to consider this audience as a really reliable group of part-time workers. I think to your point at the start, though, that's the people who are choosing to work with us. I think sadly we see age discrimination is all too rife, actually. And we do hear shocking stories from our membership group. We've seen shocking examples of this, where the outdated stereotypes of age in the workplace are just really inhibiting and really damaging for the company to think like that. And again, with a lot of our press outreach is trying to drive awareness of that and help people consider that that's perhaps a very outdated view. I think when we look at someone who's turned 50 today, they're fundamentally healthier, fitter, fully digitally native compared to their parents' generation when they hit 50. And I think unless stereotypes and reflections of that have not shifted as much as the reality has, so trying to encourage people to shift perceptions on that, I think is a cool thing we're trying to do. Yeah,
fantastic. Well, Stuart, this has been absolutely fascinating. I'd like to pick up again with you, if I may, on some of the training and some of the other opportunities with you, but maybe we'll have that at another podcast. So I'll get time to chat to you again, because I think what you're doing is absolutely, it's fascinating, and it's exactly what's needed to help people kind of gain the confidence and see what the opportunities available to them are. And from the employer's perspective as well, I can see that you're offering huge value.
If you'd like to find out more about Rest Less and the great work that they're doing, check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you'll also find some useful links. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please do leave a review on iTunes to help more people like you to discover us. It really does help. To get in touch, please email me at hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk or connect with me on Twitter at JustinKingCFP. I'm always keen to hear your feedback. Next week, we will hear from Tim Drake, an inspiring chap who relaunched his career in his 50s after he'd lost everything due to the recession. Now in his 70s, Tim has co-founded and run businesses, think tanks and charities. He believes that working into later life can help us realise our full potential. So once again, thank you to Timeline App for sponsoring the podcast. You can find out more about them more about Timeline at timelineapp.co. So until next time, this is Justin King helping you feel more informed in your retirement.
Thank you for listening to the Retirement Cafe podcast with Justin King. To find out more, you can find us online at theretirementcafe.co.uk.